Okay, it's time for a solemn occasion here on Breaking Points. They always say that, you should never rub it in when people are down.
Should we have a moment of silence?
And yeah, well, some people listen to this as a podcast, so I don't think that would work. But you guys can take your own moments of silence while we continue to describe the story. So we got the tragic news for the country. Let's go ahead and put it up there on the screen. CNN has officially fired Brian Stelter of Reliable Sources, canceling his show unceremoniously and giving him only a couple of days notice. Please put the New York Times story up there on the screen. What they describe in here is that Stelter was called into Chris Licht, who's the new boss over at CNN's office on Wednesday. Reporting indicates he emerged ashen, and after that meeting, the news slowly broke. His show, with the last show, would air on Sunday. It has aired, and unfortunately, we do have a clip of that for all of you to see. But it is interesting only in this light. As we have discussed, we had the video that many of you saw on our channel about John Malone. He's a major investor in Discovery, which is the parent company of CNN, has said, I want to see CNN get back to hard news. We know that Chris Licht was tasked by David Zaslav, who's the new CEO of Discovery, to completely undo the Zucker era over at CNN. One of his first acts at the network is no more stupid breaking news banners unless it's real. The next one was cleaning out many of Zucker's people, also immediately canceling CNN+. Since then, there has been open reporting that Chris Licht and David Zaslav, the brass over there, cannot stand Jim Acosta and Brian Stelter's posturing as partisan, as going after Fox, becoming basically just clowns on the network, which are open partisan hacks. And it is not a surprise then that Chris's first real firing and reshape of the schedule is to specifically go after Stelter, who was the real face of this kind of contingent at CNN. So what that led to, the final cancellation of the show. And I think actually, Krystal, the sign off by Stelter just tells us exactly why he really needed to go in the first place. We have some of that. Let's take a listen.
I love this show. This small but mighty show punched above its weight for so many years. Even a former president commented on the cancellation. Reliable Sources has been a one-of-a-kind show and a popular show. This is one of CNN's highest-rated weekend shows. So I want to say thank you to all of you watching around the world.
And by that, he means a couple 100,000 people. But,
highest rated weekend show. The weekends on cable news are
garbage.
Yeah.
The only people doing that are stuck in an airport like I was.
One of the highest rated. And I also love him being like their David versus Goliath, like small but mighty show that punched above its weight. Are you kidding? Like, you work for this gigantic multi-billion-dollar multinational brand, and you're acting like you're just the little guy out there doing his best. Hilarious.
Yeah.
Licht has said after Stelter's firing, he said there will be moves to CNN employees at an editorial meeting. There will be moves you may not agree with or understand. I want to acknowledge to everyone that this is a time of change. I know that it is unsettling. So, I mean, I've given my sort of assessment of all of this. Stelter kept his slot when he was very clearly not good at being a television anchor. Put aside his ideology or any of that.
Just bad.
He's just not good at being a television anchor.
Didn't he say he's always sitting like that?
He's always like.
I'm not going to claim I don't sit weird. Like, I put my knees up sometimes just because it's more comfortable. But
I've told the story before too. I mean, I went on that show and I don't remember. We were talking about impeachment or something like that. And I said something which was, kind of a bomb in terms of cable news world, like not something that people normally say on these shows. And he was very unable to process in real time what I was saying. It was very clear he had a list of questions and he asked me the question, and then it didn't matter what I said. He was going to go on to question number 2 and just very robotically. So this was, anyway, the reason he kept this slot in spite of poor ratings and poor performance was because he was willing to toe the line for Jeff Zucker when it counted.
Correct.
And this became really clear in the whole Chris and Andrew Cuomo scandal, when he went out on the late night shows, Brian Stelter did, and was willing to defend CNN's handling of the whole Chris Cuomo situation in spite of that. I mean, it was a clear violation of journalistic norms, and your job as the media critic is supposed to be not just to criticize other media platforms, but to apply that critical lens to your own media platform as well. And so the whole reason he was there was because he was a Zucker loyalist and he was willing to, toe the sort of CNN propaganda line. And so once his benefactor was gone, immediately the reporting started that his head was probably on the chopping block. Now, listen, I am skeptical. Number one, I'm skeptical that the Krystal changes are really actually going to improve CNN. My problem isn't that CNN has an ideological lens. My problem is that they get stories wrong and that they have a total partisan bias, just like MSNBC does and just like Fox News does as well, that makes them boring, predictable, and oftentimes like inaccurate and like causes them to lie in service of sort of Democratic Party elites. I don't know that the changes that he is proposing here, which is to make it more quote unquote centrist, where it's like, well, this side says, but that side also says this, is gonna make it any better. It just means you're sort of just like carrying water for Beltway conventional wisdom and like, a similar cadre of elites. We'll see. I'm also skeptical that those changes are ultimately going to last.
Yeah, that's the real one.
Because Trump is gonna be back. And you know what's going to happen. The hosts who are willing to be sort of the most out there in terms of what they're saying about Trump are going to get the highest ratings. And ultimately, it's a business. And is he really going to focus on or promote the hosts who are getting poor ratings because they're staying at this sort of centrist-y, milquetoast, one side says what the other side says lane, when the people who are willing to throw the bombs are getting all the eyeballs. So I'm very skeptical that ultimately the business model of Trump derangement isn't going to be what prevails in the end.
I completely agree with you. And just to give everybody a trip down memory lane, Media Research Center put together a highlight reel over on Brian Stelter's career. Let's take a listen.
To understand why so many Republicans have abandoned democracy, you have to hear the poisonous propaganda. What do folks in the reality-based media do in the coming weeks? Biden's secret emails. This is a classic example of the right-wing media machine.
When we're not able to say that Hunter Biden's laptop is a story worth pursuing.
You say we're not allowed, we're not able.
Between...
Who's the people stopping the conversation? Who are they? Is it possible to make Fox News viewers change their minds about key issues just by having them change the channel? Entire media companies essentially exist to tear down Joe Biden. Can we have an honest conversation about gas prices? Or has the coverage been out of proportion, out of step with the American public? Too much of the US media chatter is distorted to the point of being dishonest. Dana Milbank, here's his column for The Post this weekend, and he says he has data to show that the press has turned more negative against Biden than the press was against Trump. What do you think about that? Does it ring true to you? Trump might have committed treason. What does Putin have on Trump? The US president possibly working for the Russians. Is President Trump a racist? Is the Trump presidency a criminal presidency?
Look, it's perfect. That's what he excelled at. What I best heard him described as the media's janitor, as in like the cleanup guy to always make sure. And look, I mean, there was a real cry. It's funny, if you go on Twitter and you'll see, the nation's press is in mourning right now. This is their #1 defender. And I say, oh, thank you, Brian, for standing up for the First Amendment. First of all, this guy never stood up for actual free press or free expression. It was purely as a defender of the establishment media and its wing. But second, and I think this is the real tragedy of Stelter's story, here's what people forget. He was actually good at his job once upon a time when he was working at the New York Times as a media reporter, covering the morning shows like Ann Curry getting fired.
Did you say his morning show book was actually really good?
Great book. I read it. It's 2013. I don't know if people know this. The Apple TV series, The Morning Show, is based on Stelter's book.
This is another thing you see in media all too often, though, is like, okay, I trust your judgment that this was a good book and that, I certainly know he was a well-sourced reporter who would get good scoops and do a good job on some of his reporting when he was in that lane, is like, they all want to be TV stars.
Yes.
And again, putting the ideology aside, this was not someone who was meant to be a TV star.
He's not cut out for this.
To me, the greatest crime he committed was just how he was completely willing to toe the CNN corporate line and play cleanup, do the cleanup job for them whenever Zucker asked him to. He was reliably there to borrow a pun from their name, reliably there to just carry water for his own management. So to me, that was the greatest crime he committed.
Now, as to what's coming next, let's put this up there. CNN's new boss actually hinted to the Stelter to the staff, there will be many more changes, and you might not understand it or like it all, he said on Friday morning. And as I actually tweeted this out this morning, Krystal, some new reporting also from Puck Puck News that Jeffrey Toobin is the first of many paid contributors whose contracts will not be renewed at the network. So look, is their whole strategy going to work? Probably not. Will I watch a bunch of people, I joked, it's like, oh, a never Trump former CIA recession is coming. If all these people lose their jobs, am I going to cry tears for them? No, absolutely not. I keep thinking about the line from the Joker, only going to paraphrase it, you get what you deserve.
Although, honestly, I could see him being the type that would like bring in a bunch of never Trump CIA types in the interest of like being nonpartisan, like these are Republicans,
See, now I'm just back to the black bill.
Yeah.
Look, there is no saving this whole thing.
I just want to temper expectations that the changes here, even though you might be happy that Brian Stelter is out, that the changes here are ultimately going to amount to anything we might view as progress in terms of journalistic integrity. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.